Now, this might be one of the most divisive topics in all of the real estate community. Are you pro or are you anti HOAs? Well, today we're going to be going over some of the pros and cons that you might experience living in an HOA community to really see if living in one of these communities might be right for you, or if I might be saving you from the biggest financial mistake of your life. But before we get into all of that, my name is Zach Payne, and I'm a local real estate agent right here in Sarasota, Florida. After being involved in over 50 transactions since 2022, I've had the opportunity to become really familiar with the ins and outs of HOA communities and what goes into them. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, starting off with our first pro of living in an HOA neighborhood is the amenities. Now, I'll have to admit, I do get a little bit jealous when I see those state-of-the-art fitness center rooms with all of the gym equipment that you could ever possibly dream of, or those beautiful massive pools that you could lounge around in all day long, or all those seemingly unlimited amounts of pickleball, tennis, or basketball courts right there ready at your fingertips. Now, if you're someone who's active and enjoys these types of things, then you might see the value of living in an HOA neighborhood. Conversely, these amenities are not found in non-HOA communities. There's no pools, no tennis courts, there's not even a gate. So that sense of security, whether you think it's a false sense of security or not, you don't really have a choice there. Now, our first con of HOA communities is the crazy management that can happen. Everybody always seems to have such a terrible story about an HOA community that they used to live in. And if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, oh, well, I've never had a bad experience with an HOA or a management company, consider yourself one of the lucky ones and always be prepared for a Karen to get on the board. I know it's a terrifying thought, but hope for the best and prepare for the worst. It can only be a matter of time before somebody with more time than they know what to do with gets on the board and starts evoking changes. A lot of times, unless you have rules and regulations in place, it can be really difficult to combat these management people. Don't just take my word for it. Here's what other people have to say about their past HOA community experiences. Callie Lovebug says, I was in an HOA. The president was the craziest man in the subdivision. He has all of our money at his disposal to sue us for absolutely no reason. Now, I've heard of some bad HOA president stories. I've experienced some myself. However, having the HOA president using the money from the reserves to sue their own homeowners, I find that really hard to believe. But I guess when you're commenting on the internet where nobody can fact check you, you can embellish your story a little bit. Now this one sounds a little bit more realistic. If you're a power tripping individual, then being on the board of an HOA is just for you. I can feel the disdain for the HOA coming through the screen. All right, now one last one, I promise. If you live in an HOA community, at the end of the day, know that it's the HOA that owns your house, not you. Yes, there are good HOAs, but I say it's good until it isn't. People come and go. Wait until a busybody or narcissist gets in there. This seems to be a pretty realistic outlook on HOA communities. Pro number 2 is maintain home values. This is the whole point of an HOA at the end of the day. Look, I'm gonna say something that not a lot of you are going to enjoy or agree with, but at the end of the day, nobody wants to live next to your crappy looking house with weeds taller than your dog, overgrown bushes and trees, while you've got 5 cars parked in your yard, all while blasting music at 1 o'clock in the morning. Sorry, that was oddly specific. But the point is, you could move into the prettiest and most well-maintained neighborhood or street. You could have done all your due diligence and looked at all the curb appeal of all of the other houses on the street and seen that they were all as well-maintained as the one you were going to buy. But it can all go to waste when all of a sudden, your neighbor right next to you decides that he's gonna sell his house. Well, the guy who buys it, well, his car has no muffler on it. You can hear him pulling into the neighborhood from a mile away. And he likes leaving his house at the middle of the night too. So hopefully you're not a light sleeper. Oh, and he painted his house camouflage because it's a free country and you can't tell me what to do. He doesn't like to mow the grass or trim the shrubs. As a matter of fact, he says he likes it when the shrubs are overgrown and go up onto the house. Well, now you're stuck next to him. And if the time comes where you want to sell your house to potential buyer pool, just decreased significantly. Honestly, curb appeal, believe it or not, can drastically affect the price of a house, but it's not usually directly correlated. Homes like the one I've described earlier can be an eyesore and a red flag to many people, and given the choice, they will choose to buy elsewhere. People listing their homes next to an eyesore run the risk of going stale. This causes homeowners to decrease the price of their home in hopes of stirring up additional interest. Now, homeowners are stuck constantly decreasing the price of their house until they finally get an offer, or they just decide to take the house off the market altogether and suck it up. An HOA would give buyers the confidence in their investment of a property, knowing that the issues that may arise will be dealt with and they don't have to run the risk of a guy like I described earlier moving right next to them. All right, now on to con number 2, and that would be the restrictive rules and regulations. I once was helping a client with a home search when I found the perfect home for them. We toured it and they almost fell in love with it immediately, and we quickly submitted an offer which got accepted. If you're not aware, almost all HOA communities require an application. Most of the time, it's more of a formality than anything, but others will dig deep, and this neighborhood dug deep. The couple I was helping, let's name them John and Jane. Well, 40 years ago, John had gotten a DUI. It was in another state, and it was a really long time ago. He had served his community service and had basically forgotten all about it. It had never stopped him from getting another job or moving into another home, but it was on his record. Remember, after an offer was accepted, we had 30 days to close on the home, or else we were in breach of contract. Well, after we submitted the HOA application, I get a response from the board of the HOA saying that they don't allow anybody with a record to purchase a property in their neighborhood. I was shocked, to be honest. I went to John and asked him about it, and he told me that he had a DUI and it was 40 years ago, it was in California, it was a long time ago. He had honestly forgotten about it too. Well, I learned that after 10 years, you can have your DUI record expunged in the state of California where he got it. And then the HOA can't hold that against him. Now, this came down to the wire, but we were able to close on the property even after some serious consideration from John and Jane, who were really unsure if they even wanted to live in a community like this that held a prejudice so heavily. They said, we understand if it was a murder case or something like that, but this was an honest mistake over 40 years ago. On a less serious note, when living in an HOA community, you have to submit what's called an ARC request or an architectural request if you want to make any major changes to your property. Those changes are subject to approval and is dependent on the type of changes. When my dad had new palm trees put in after Hurricane Ian uprooted all of the landscaping, he actually forgot to put in one of those ARC requests. But luckily for him, the HOA didn't notice. Now, like I talked about earlier, if you have somebody who's a busybody or has a little bit too much time on their hands on your board, you might not be able to slip through the cracks like we did. Another thing, when painting your house, each HOA is different. Some neighborhoods I go into look like that one movie where all the houses look exactly the same, from the paint color to the landscaping to the door color. Other neighborhoods are more lenient and just require the color to be approved by the board or on a list of approved colors. Pro number 3 would be the increased community involvement. And yes, I'm looking at this one as a benefit. Many of the neighborhoods I sell in have bulletin boards for activities, meetups, gatherings. Some neighborhoods have full-time community directors whose whole job it is to create and promote community events. Again, these are the kinds of things that you only get out of a neighborhood where you are in an HOA. Con number 3 would be the fees and the fines. We talked about the rules and regulations. Now it's time to talk about how much those will cost you. In general, each HOA community can fine a person up to a set amount of money. If the person does not pay the fines that the HOA has presented them, then they can put a lien on the property. At this point, the HOA can no longer fine the person breaking the rules, but when that person goes to sell their house, the HOA will get paid first and then the homeowner. In most neighborhoods, it's broken down like this. Each fine is worth $100. They can fine somebody usually up to about 10 times or $1,000 per violation. Each neighborhood has different amounts of violations written in their documents. So the stricter the neighborhood, the more rules they have, the more money they can potentially fine for a person. Not only that, but when my clients start to close in on a neighborhood that they like, sometimes the HOA or condo association fees can be more than $500 per month. Now, of course, this depends, but for a condo building, they are required to keep a specific amount of funds in their reserves. Ever since that horrible accident with the Surfside condo building that collapsed in Miami, Florida. At the same time, condo insurance went up and exterior insurance is usually covered by the association dues. So those two things right there spiked condo fees, especially here in Florida. For single family home neighborhoods, their prices are just based on what amenities they provide and the size of the community. The bigger neighborhoods typically have lower HOA fees just because more people can pool in and pitch in money to help support the needs of the community. You know, full-time activities directors still need to get paid a full-time wage. Pools need to be maintained. If the neighborhood is a maintenance-free neighborhood, then they still have to hire a contracting company to come out and maintain the land. The streets still need to be repaved, the light posts still need to be repainted, the electricity still needs to be paid, the new mailboxes need to be installed, that beautiful pond that you have in the backyard still needs to be serviced, the roads need to be maintained. There's a lot of things that you're paying for with those HOA dues. I guess at the end of the day, it just depends on the kind of person you are, your family's preferences. I don't think there's a right or wrong side to the argument, just personal preference. I have yet to have a terrible experience with living in an HOA community. I'm curious to know in the comments, Are you pro or anti HOAs? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.